Welcome to the Hazard Class Podcast. This is the podcast where I get to ask my stupid questions of some of the smartest people in and around the world of emergency response. My guest this week is a Canadian firefighter, author, adventurer, jiu-jitsu master, internet content creator from British Columbia. He's been in the fire service for over 25 years. He received the Medal of Bravery in 2004 following the rescue of two fellow firefighters from a collapsing warehouse. He holds a master's degree in biology from McGill University. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt and instructor. He spent more than 4 decades exploring the Canadian North, both solo and as a guide. He shares his experiences and insights through his podcast, multiple successful YouTube channels, and in his upcoming book, Perseverance, Life and Death in the Subarctic, where he recounts a 1,000-mile solo journey through the Canadian Subarctic, a book that I recently read, and the story is incredible. I can't recommend it enough. We're going to talk about all that and more today with my guest, Mr. Stephan Kesting. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jake. That's a very kind introduction, so I appreciate it.
Well, like I said, it was hard to consolidate it. As I was going, every page I turned, no pun intended, there was more information to cover. It seems like you just refuse to quit. There's everything you're doing, and you seemingly do it all at a very high level, which is very impressive. As is the format of the show, we're going to start out with our wheel of stupid questions. Just a reminder that asking questions is good, and if you point them at the right people, you can get some really smart answers. So we'll bounce into that. All right, it's time to hit the wheel of stupid questions. It's a real wheel, and it's really spinning. Okay. Here's an interesting one from the north side of the globe. Do you believe in aliens?
Well, I think when you consider that there are millions and millions and billions of planets out there, yes, there has to be life out there. Whether that's intelligent life, whether that's more advanced life, that's a valid question. There have been some good arguments. There's actually a really interesting book from about 15 years ago called Rare Earth. It goes through all the factors why probably bacterial life is common, but complex life is rare. And there's some really weird stuff. Like, for example, plate tectonics. We think of plate tectonics as something that happens below us, but we don't think about it. But plate tectonics is incredibly important for climate regulation. And if you don't have plate tectonics, like Mars doesn't have plate tectonics, then it screws up your carbon cycle. And thus, you end up with wild fluctuations of temperature. You can spin off either into runaway greenhouse scenarios or runaway ice house scenarios. Or what was another one? Another one was having like a gas giant outside your orbit. For example, with us, we have Jupiter and we have Saturn, and those act like giant asteroid and comet magnets. So if there's something circulating around the solar system, it tends to get sucked into Jupiter as opposed to getting sucked into the Earth. And then we don't end up with mass extinction events every 2 million years. We end up with mass extinction events every 100 million years. So I'm going to go with bacterial life is super common out there. And that actually we might already have contaminated Mars with our probes. So there are probably Martians, but it's Earth bacteria that we've introduced back to Mars. So that's a long rant because I happened to read the wrong book for your question. It's a great book.
It's an extremely smart answer to an extremely stupid question, which is exactly what we're hoping for. How about this, though? I'm going to go one layer deeper on it. So You've spent an unbelievable amount of time in the Canadian wilderness.
Sure.
Have you seen a UFO?
No, I have not seen a UFO. Although buddies of mine, and I'm not going to reveal who they are because they may or may not work for the fire service, were out in the bush, high as kites on mushrooms, and they saw a bunch of UFOs go overhead.
Oh, how convenient for them.
They all confirmed that they were UFOs. And then the next day they figured out that it was the Starlink satellites that are totally ruining astronomers' view of the skies. But at the time, they were like, "You're seeing that? Yeah, I'm seeing that." But, so no, I've not seen a UFO.
Well, with the amount of time that you've spent in the, alone in the wilderness, you'd think that if someone would be qualified to say they've seen a UFO, you'd think you'd have a pretty good spot in the resume.
Well, I tend to go north in the summertime, and in the summertime, you've got very long periods of daylight, right? It might only get dark for a couple of hours, so it's not optimal UFO viewing settings. So maybe if you go up there in December during winter solstice, there's UFOs everywhere. I wouldn't know. I've not been in Nunavut, the Northwest Territories, or Alaska in December, but I'll leave that open.
That's really funny. We'll get on with the meat and potatoes here. Although I could talk at this depth about UFOs for quite a while. So like I kind of alluded to, it seems like you have a real affinity for doing difficult things. Where does that come from? Where's the origin story of like your just love for doing extremely hard things?
Honestly, it does tie in with firefighting but the first obsession of my life really was martial arts training. I wanted to be a ninja. I wanted to be Bruce Lee. There's an entire generation of people who either became martial artists because they wanted to be Bruce Lee, then they wanted to be martial artists because they wanted to be ninjas, and then they wanted to be martial artists because they watched the early UFCs. So I'm a little bit of all three. And it's inherently difficult if it's at all worthwhile, it's going to be difficult. And then when I started thinking about what do I want to do to get away from sitting in front of a computer all the time, working as a professional biologist, which is what I was doing, I started thinking about what did I enjoy about martial arts training? And it was training to do something and then going and do it. It was kind of preparing and then realizing it. And really, when you think about it, that's a lot of the fire service as well. You prepare to do something and then you go do it. I can't count the number of times when we've, done a ladder drill, and then later in the day we're using that same technique to ladder a building. Or we did a joint hazmat confined space training scenario about a year ago, and because it was a scenario, there was fake hydrogen sulfide gas in the hole. We ventilated, and the con space nerds got the dummy out. We went back to the hall, and then an hour later came an actual H2S call for basically a giant battery bank had overcharged. It was releasing H2S, and there were people who were affected by it. And it was really cool. It was too bad for those people, but it was really cool that you train for something and then you get to go do it for real. And so I think that. So if it's worth doing, it's probably going to be hard. And also, if it's worth doing, it's probably worth preparing for it. So that doesn't really answer your question. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a Protestant work ethic gone completely sideways. If it's not painful and difficult, then it's not worth doing.
Well, there's probably something to that too, but that might be something for a psychologist, not for me.
I'll call up the EAP program.
Yeah. So you talked about how you were working as a professional biologist prior to joining the fire service. When was that? How did that transition happen?
I trained as a biologist. I did my undergrad and I did my master's focusing on a really controversial topic in the fire service. My master's was in climate change, specifically in the Arctic. So if somebody wants to argue with me about that, I'm more than down. But working as a biologist is different from studying biology because you're really just spending all day in front of the computer typing. And you might do some field work in the summer. You might go to some interesting places by helicopter, but then you spend all winter writing it up. And by the end of the winter, you just want to shoot yourself. So trying to think of what else I wanted to do. And unlike many firefighters, I never wanted to be a firefighter as a kid. I was short-sighted. I hadn't had laser eye surgery, was just coming up. So it was kind of like, well, I'd like to be an astronaut, but I can't be an astronaut. Yeah. I can't be a firefighter either. And then I started seriously thinking about like, what the hell am I going to do? There was a very long drive to a field site in the north, and we had to drive up and we had to drive down. I spent that whole drive thinking about, like, I got to get out of this field, and thinking about people I knew who seemed to enjoy what they did, and they were firefighters, and like, well, maybe this is worth looking into. So the connection to hazmat came later when we started a hazmat program. Basically, our department had a couple back-to-back hazmat calls, and they had to contract it out to a neighboring department, which was very happy to bill them. I want to say like $100,000 to show up with a battalion chief in their hazmat rig. So then mayor and council said, okay, we're going to start this ourselves. This seems like a good gig to get into. And honestly, when it comes to the hazmat aspect of things, I think the main advantage of having a couple degrees in a related topic is that it just makes you not worried when you see a big, long chemical name. There's no real difference between dealing with methane, that's a name, or a propane. That's a hazmat material that most people understand, even not hazmat nerds. And then dealing with dimethyl pentane, or 1,2-dimethyl, or 2,3-dimethyl pentane. Okay, it's got a big fancy name, and it could be even 10 times longer, but it's just a name. It doesn't matter. It's going to have properties. Let's figure out if it's going to blow up. Let's figure out if it's going to melt your face off. Let's figure out if it's going to light on fire. Is it miscible with water? Does it go up? Does it go down? So I think that's really the main advantage of having had the biology background going into hazmat.
So what year was that you made the transition?
I transitioned. Very progressive. I transitioned in 1999.
Okay. So, I want to get back to talking hazmat, but I don't want to jump over this important thing in your career. So you got in 99. In 2001, you were ultimately involved in that rescue that warranted the Medal of Bravery. Walk me through that run. What happened? It's a crazy story from the surface level that I read about it.
Yeah. So I came in as a fire alarm, as all great big fires do. And we were coming in, I think we were third in. And as we're heading over the bridge, heading to an industrial area, it was on Annacis Island. It's basically an industrial center in the city that I work in. The captain and the driver in the front were going, holy shit, look at that. And I looked up and I didn't see anything. What they were looking at was a giant plume of smoke that was so large that I thought it was a cloud, like a cloud in the sky. It turned out to be a 5-acre large paper warehouse, so giant rolls of paper that had been lit on fire by a forklift. They had a propane-powered forklift in a paper warehouse. It lit the paper on fire, dragged it through, and so we had this massive, very, very combustible structure on fire. The sprinklers went off, but the sprinklers weren't going to control it. But what it did do was undermine a bunch of the storage. So it basically, boxes piled on top of each other, not properly stored the way they're supposed to. The first team of 3 guys went in, and there was a collapse. Basically, it was a cascading domino collapse and buried them. So this is early when we were just bringing in RIT teams and RIC teams, and I was on the RIT team. I don't know if when that first came up, you're like, oh, shit, I'm on RIT. I'm just going to sit here.
Yep. I know that feeling very well.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the cases where I think it was my second time on RIT ever, a pretty new guy. And all of a sudden there was a collapse. And the guy that I was with thought the roof had come in. And I thought a bunch of boxes had fallen over. As it turns out, it was a little bit worse than what I thought, and a little bit better than what he thought. So we went in, team of 4 guys. This is back in the day before everyone had a radio.
Yeah.
And so we had a couple radios. We lost those, but we managed to dig through the debris and rescue 2 guys, one of whom had his back broken by the collapse.
Wow.
The other guy mostly managed to dig himself out, but it was also relatively early in our use of positive pressure ventilation, PPV. Mm-hmm. So I'll say both the advent of RIT or RIC and the advent of PPV, at least in our department, was super useful because it did create a kind of a defensible space and improve the visibility in there enough to find the guys, drag them out. One guy made his own way out. So I guess the interesting thing there is, as we were digging through the debris, we used to, again, before everyone had a radio, the signal for evacuation would be every truck sounding its air horn for 10 to 15 seconds.
Yep.
So as we were doing that, that alarm was sounded. So we looked at each other and go, is that to tell those guys to get out? Or is that telling us to get out because the building's about to collapse? And so we kept going and we got them out. As it turns out, it wasn't that the building was about to collapse. That happened a couple hours later. But it's, I guess that's sort of a plausible deniability, right? If the building did collapse, then, hey, we told them to get out. If the building doesn't collapse and we ignore, if you disobey orders and things turn out well, then you get a medal or a couple medals. So
I frequently joke about that, no one in the fire service ever got a medal for not breaking the rules. It seems to be that way. Yeah, that's amazing. And also being that early in your career, right? What was that like as, I imagine being a relatively junior person on that scene and now being involved with that kind of level of an incident?
Yeah. I wasn't thinking about it at the time, honestly. It's like, how do we get these guys out? All the thinking about it, philosophizing about it, that happens at a later date. In the meantime, you're like, where the hell? It's granular. Where the hell is Dave? I know Dave's in there somewhere. Where's Rob? Rob's in there somewhere. So I kind of shut my mind off, and we basically dug in along the hose line that was lying under all this debris, and I got him out. I mean, we're lucky. Like, the debris wasn't as heavy as it could have been, but we did have to go a fair distance. And I think there is something to that. Not getting medals for not following the rules. And it's all in retrospect, whether you did the right thing or the wrong thing, because you can make the right decision and have things go poorly, and you can make all the poor decisions and have things go well.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think you have to detach decisions from the outcome.
Well, I think that is, one of the interesting things about, getting awards at the fire service is that, if you just do it the way it's supposed to happen, you're just doing your job, right? Like if you just show up and do exactly the SOP, SOG down the line, you're just doing what you signed up to do. It's when you deviate because of the situation or something that, sometimes things that are pretty spectacular can happen, which is great. And congratulations for that. It's really awesome. I'm sure those two are very appreciative of the work you did. So let's talk a little bit about the department then, right? Sure. So you got on the department. We were talking just a little bit before about kind of the nature of the department, the size of the department. Why don't you just fill me in on that and we'll go from there. Yeah.
So a couple hundred guys and girls, call it a medium-sized department, but it's not giant. It's no LA fire. It's no New York fire. So it's probably a fairly representative department. Delta Fire Department, which is just south of Vancouver. Vancouver should be one giant department, and it's not. It's 14 different municipalities, each inventing things on their own. And we've got a very strong industrial base. We got a lot of industry and ferries and major highway arteries. So I'd say hazmat's a pretty big component of the risk profile. And it's a pretty big part of what we do. So it's interesting because we don't have the budget that a larger department would have. And you're trying to create specialized teams within an environment where everyone needs to be a little bit of a generalist. Obviously, if you had a department with 10 guys, everybody would need to do everything. But if you had a department with 200 guys, now you can get some specialization. And how do you incentivize that? How do you reward that? How do you keep your teams together? That's a pretty big issue. That's not big enough to have full-time dedicated hazmat guys. And so I think that's probably one big bifurcation that a lot of departments go to. By the time you have extreme specialization, this is what we do, and we're not going to do inspections, and we're not going to go to medical calls, and we're not going to go to, car accidents. And then that's taking it to the next level. But a lot of people, a lot of departments, they can't get that granular.
So if the department is, 200 odd people, how many people are involved in your hazmat program then?
Yeah. So that's evolved over time. Initially, and probably people can relate, the chief of the day says, okay, we're starting a hazmat program. You guys go get your haz tech. So we'll get, I don't know, forget what the first batch was, say 30, 40 guys getting their HazTech program, and here's a bunch of equipment, and good, we're done. And as it turns out, no, you're not quite done. I mean, for one thing, nobody knows how to use any of this equipment. Back in the day, we had our first piece of equipment was an MSA PID, 5-gas, 4-gas and PID. And it was something like 27 button pushes to change the gas from isobutylene to any other gas for the PID to apply a correction factor. And I'd say there were maybe 2 people in the department who could do it. So like, okay, we need to. So that was my first hazmat contribution, was creating a flow chart just for my own use, because I didn't want to look like an idiot in the middle of the night. Yeah. Saying, okay, first push this button 3 times, then push this other button 2 times, go up, 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 down, down, down. If I have a personal vendetta in hazmat, it's about shitty interfaces. We've got these amazing detectors now, but the design interface is just, if how many times have I consulted the instruction manual from my iPhone? 0.
Oh man. Yeah. Yep. Exactly right.
And this can do so many more things than call it a 4-gas or a PID.
I think it might be a balance between, I don't know, durability. It seems like they want to put the least amount of buttons on it as possible, when you could easily, I don't know, if you had the availability to make it more of a user-friendly interface, the utilization.
I'm calling bullshit on that. Remember the old iPhones? They had 1 button.
That's fair.
Yeah.
But then you also have to have a touchscreen that doesn't, explode when inevitably every firefighter drops it on the ground 1,000 times. But no, I agree.
Let's not talk about the incident where a bunch of firefighters who I may know decided to decontaminate their dirty 4-gas by putting in the dishwasher.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Turns out that it doesn't do very well with.
You can't do that, huh?
No, you can't.
Oh, that might have been a training class. Maybe a couple. So is that your act of, self-preservation to make this flow chart for the PID, that kind of was your gateway drug to hazmat instruction? Is that right?
Yeah. And then eventually it has to come from the floor. Like, maybe if you're in a department that's just blessed with somebody super visionary as a deputy chief or whatever level these decisions get made, maybe that person can look down and say, oh, here's what we need to do. But 9 times out of 10, meaningful change is driven at least in part from below. And so, we lobbied for saying, we went through the union and we talked directly to management, like, okay, we need somebody who's going to spearhead this. And we created instructors, right? There was a need from the floor for ongoing training. Guess what? If you're going to do something as complicated as hazmat, you're going to need ongoing training. And I mean, this is what your entire business and livelihood is based on. But this is a revelation to some fire chiefs, especially years ago. So just trying to produce resources, and I think being willing to put in some work to make something better, even when you're not getting compensated for it or getting recognized for it initially. I mean, maybe that turns into something down the road, and it did. So right now we've got 4 platoons. Each platoon's got a couple of hazmat instructors. There's a program, there's weekly training that we deliver. We have what's called a hazmat boot camp, which in theory is like 6 weeks of reasonably intense refresher every year for everybody who's on the team. That often runs more than 6 weeks. But these are all things that evolved over time in response to perceived needs from the floor.
How are you facilitating that boot camp? Is that like an online thing, or is that like pulling people off shift, or how's it go?
It was done online during COVID, like when we weren't supposed to interact with other crews, but that's not how it was designed to do. It's basically a series of 12 or 13 modules recapping the most. For example, there's a corrosives module, there's a PID module, there's a placards and ERG module, there's a bonding and grounding and flammable liquids transfer module.
Is that happening on like on shift at the crew level, or is it being facilitated on a larger scale than that?
Unfortunately, it's on shift at the crew level.
Okay.
So it's we're getting busier and busier, so it's getting harder and harder to run classes and run scenarios. If you get doing a full level A entry and everyone's suited up, and then the tones go off and you got to run off to some MVI, that is a pretty strong disincentive to do more complex training.
It's very hard to facilitate that. So I know you have an awesome YouTube channel, Delta Hazmat.
Oh.
Is that a derivative of your training at the department, or is that something you're doing separate to that?
No, that's 100%. That was basically an internal resource for, hey, let me do a little mini lecture on how to use the foregas, and as opposed to, and just have it sit there and be a resource. Also, before we had any spectroscopy, we developed a fairly long procedure for identifying unknown, or attempting to identify unknown compounds. Well, that's complex. It's basically was our own HazCat system. Yeah. And that's not an easy thing to do. So just to create a reference point, like one of my hazmat mentors said this. He says, when you're new to hazmat, you go and visit another department. You say, hey, show me all your toys, show me all your detectors, show me all your tools. And when you've been in hazmat for a while, you go to another department and you say, can you show me your documentation?
Yeah.
And there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
There's some truth to that, because it's not whether you have a spectroscopy capability. It's what sheets do you have there, so that in the middle of the night, when you've been up for 18 hours, and you're trying to remember, how do I turn this bloody thing on, or can this thing see through water or not? I forget.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You kind of have to train to not the highest denominator. You have to train for the guy who's in on a shift change or in on overtime. All the normal people who are there are sick, or maybe there's one guy from the normal crew. And this may or may not be an issue with larger departments when they can specifically bring in hazmat specialists. But even hazmat specialists, well, they're technicians and they're technicians.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah. So if you create the cheat sheet or the quick reference guides or whatever you want to call them, that are basically glued to the piece of equipment.
Yes, absolutely. A good quick reference sheet is worth its weight in gold. That's absolutely true. So I do want to touch on some of the other facets of your existence, which is so vast. So you just like seemingly have just figured out YouTube, right? Like you have all these channels. They're all super successful. From the podcast to your BJJ stuff, to Delta Hazmat, like, where does that come from? When did you decide, like, I'm going to do the whole online YouTube thing, and obviously it's like really taken off?
Yeah. Well, I mean, every firefighter is a workaholic, an alcoholic, or a sportaholic, and I don't drink, so that makes me a sportaholic and a workaholic.
Yeah.
And so the side business that I started when I got into the fire department was related to jiu-jitsu, right? Or male pajama wrestling is what I called it at the time.
Yeah.
And it seemed like this YouTube thing, I remember I got onto YouTube back in 2006 for my jiu-jitsu stuff.
It's early.
And it was pretty early. And because there weren't many other people doing it at the time, that channel really took off. So I just always kept on doing that. I'm also doing that on my wilderness channel. The hazmat stuff, like, that's mostly internal reference. If I put it out there and I make it publicly available, most of it, just if it helps somebody, great. If somebody disagrees with what I put up, great.
It's good though. It really is good. If people are looking Delta Hazmat, it's a good channel.
Well, I've not done nearly enough work on that. So, and I've tried to, I've not monetized that in any way because it's associated with the department. Mm-hmm. And so it wouldn't be right for me to be like, I don't know, trying to cash in on that.
Yeah.
Who knows down the road? I'll,
maybe in retirement, who knows?
Yeah, we'll see.
So We got to talk the book. There's a huge adventure here that needs to be discussed. I read it. It's awesome. It's super intriguing and like captivating. It was like, once I started, it was hard to stop because I was just sucked into the world. So for people that aren't familiar, give me like the 10,000 foot view of the story.
Okay. So in 2012, I forget the exact date, but I found out that I was dying. I had polycystic kidney disease, which is a genetic condition. Basically, you think of the kidney as a whole bunch of little fuel filters. Eventually, with this disease, every 10th fuel filter decides it doesn't want to be a fuel filter. It wants to be a weather balloon. So it explodes. And basically, my kidney function just fell off a cliff. It went down to 50%, watching it tick down 30%. Below 25%, it really, I got super tired. I was stubborn. I stayed on the floor till 12%. I should not have been on the floor at 12% function. That's right on the cusp of dialysis. We all do stupid stuff. That was one of the stupid things I did because I had the sick time. I should have used it. Ended up having a kidney transplant for my brother, which I'm eternally grateful for. And, kind of as I made it, I survived. Let's try out this. Let's take this new body for a spin. And also the realization that life is short and I should get around to doing the things that I really wanted to do. There's this region of the north. It's the Subarctic. So it lies between the forest and the high Arctic. And it's, I've been reading about that. I'm weird, right? It's something I've been reading about for 30 years. I love adventure stories. I particularly like adventure stories from history, like Samuel Hearn's book from traveling from Churchill across the Arctic to the mouth of the Coppermine River. I've read that many times and wanting to get up there and see that country for myself. So I started connecting the dots, and before you knew it, I had a route planned. Had a departure day set. Then my wife proposed to me, and we had a wedding date set for after I got back. But we lost the venue, and the only available date for the venue was the day before I left for my trip. So I asked her, do you want me to cancel this or delay? She's like, no, you go. So I got married on one day and then left for this solo honeymoon the next day, with her permission, I should add.
What an understanding wife. Yeah. Holy cow.
Well, she knew what she was getting into, and I had that date set before we had the wedding date set. But still, So then it was 42 days across, starting in the forest, ending up on the tundra. If people think of Canada, there's a big divot in the top that's Hudson Bay. Basically, Hudson Bay is in the Arctic, and I was sort of to the left of that, to the west of Hudson Bay, very roughly.
So when you go to make this decision to do this, obviously you're fueled by this desire for adventure and to see the subarctic. You have this newfound appreciation for life and this new body that's ticking like a clock. Is some portion of this I guess I would just die instantly if I went to the subarctic. 1,000-mile journey, was there any, to me it feels like a suicide quest, right? No,
I don't think there was any death wish there at all, if that's the question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get that from reading the book at all, right? I don't get that thing, but on a deeper level, it just feels like, okay, well, you're going to go do this. Not only am I going to do this unbelievable journey, I'm going to do it by myself in like super treacherous conditions where the balance between living and dying is tenuous on a daily basis.
Sure. Well, it's important to recognize it wasn't the first thing I'd done in the outdoors.
Yeah.
I'll turn the question around. Jake, you're a firefighter. You're going into a burning building. The air is toxic to breathe. The flame can roast your skin. If you're, the building could fall on you. Why on earth do you do it? I'm just I work at a gas station. I couldn't go into a burning building, and you're right, you couldn't. right?
Yeah.
Because you don't have the equipment, you don't have the skills, you don't have the knowledge, you don't have the infrastructure around that, right? We don't go into a burning building in station gear. We go in turnout gear, wearing an SCBA. We have training as to what to look out for. And we know that, oh, this is dangerous and this looks dangerous, but it's not too bad. You know, as long as I don't take my mask or hazmat, right? Oh, this brown gas that's filling this building. We should pay attention, but as long as I don't unzip my A suit or take off my SCBA, I'll probably be okay. So in the same way, I mean, I've done. It also wasn't the first solo trip I did, right? There's a background of knowing that, you know, I did my first solo trip I talk about in the book was an accidental one where I went with my brother and he ended up bailing because he had major drug addiction issues and ran out of drugs is the simple answer. And so I continued on. And in that short 3-day trip, I found out that no, I'm actually okay alone. I'm good in a social environment. You know, I love the fire hall, but at the same time, I'm enough of an introvert that I don't mind being by myself. And then you stretch that out from 3 days to a week to multiple weeks. And each time the first long solo trip I ever did, my main fear was like, yeah, there's bears. Yeah, there's rapids. I've got to pay attention to all those things. But I really didn't want to get out there and find out that I was lonely. Like big tough guy goes canoeing and it feels all sorry for himself. That would have been embarrassing. And I wouldn't be, unfortunately, I didn't feel that. And so, yeah, that was an insane journey, that 42-day solo trip, 1,000 miles through the Subarctic. On the other hand, a lot of it's knowing what to do and equipment, right? If you take, I don't know, an Inuit hunter and you strip off his fur from 500 years ago, and you strip off all his furs that he's wearing, and you take away his harpoon and all tools, and you dump him in the middle of the ice pack, he's going to die. Right? There's nothing. He needs the equipment. He needs the tools. He has the knowledge, but it's not just if you take the very best firefighter in the world, and that has to, oh God, I'm forgetting his name. Kurt Russell in Backdraft. What's the guy's name?
Bull?
Bull. You take Bull.
Hell yeah.
Actually,
hell yeah.
And dump him take Bull in real life, dump him in the middle of a burning warehouse without SCBA. He's going to die. Doesn't matter how tough he is.
I'm not convinced. I think he would survive.
Well, I mean, given how often he was not wearing his BA and his coat was open, I guess there's video evidence to the contrary.
Did it look cool? That's all that matters. Yeah. So ultimately, through that experience, you know, how did that shape your view of life and death?
Yeah. It made me super grateful for getting a second kick at the can, because 50 years ago, I would have been dead from that kidney failure. 100 years ago, I would have been dead. 10,000 years ago, I would have been dead. There's no other time in human history that I would have survived. So thank you, medical science. And to a certain extent, I mean, there are big problems with big pharma, not going to lie, but big pharma keeps me alive now. So you got to take the good with the bad. So I'm incredibly grateful to the medical system and to science, essentially, for continuing to develop just in time to keep me alive.
Yeah. And what do you hope that the readers of this book are going to take away from it? What's that goal?
Well, I don't think traveling alone in the Arctic is for everyone, but everyone's got something that they want to do, or at least I hope so. I hope it's a little bit more profound than binge watching the next season of whatever show they're watching. If you're young and you're dreaming of being a firefighter, like, consider it. Like, what are the steps that you would need to take? And how do you get a taste of it to find out if it's for you? If your goal has been I'm going to go to outdoor adventures, right? If it's been climb a mountain, figure out what steps you would need to do to go climb mountains. I think the sense of risk versus reward and mitigating risk is also an interesting thing. I think I believe in taking risk. I don't believe in taking risks for other people. Right? The example I always use is when we watch Free Solo, when we watch Alex Honnold climb El Cap without a rope, there, 1,000-foot drop beside him. I think most people would agree he's insane, but also that it's his risk to take, right? He's only risking his life. But could you imagine if he was climbing El Cap with a little kid in a baby Bjorn behind him?
Yeah.
Like, we would rightfully lose our minds, right? We have
yes.
We have a right to swing our fist, but that right to swing our fist stops where your nose begins. And I think having doing risky things, and firefighting is an inherently risky thing, but then trying to mitigate the risks as best as possible is an important thing. And it's if you're trying to follow through on some massive life goal, whether the risks are physical or, I don't know, financial or emotional or relationship-anal, if that's a word, how do you mitigate those risks, right? If you're going to do something and it could piss off your wife, and we all know that maybe from personal experience, I know that the single best side job a firefighter can have is to not get divorced. Then how do you mitigate? How do you mitigate the risks? If you want to, I don't know, go kiteboarding in Hawaii for a month, what do you do to make that okay on the home front? How do you mitigate the risks of that? And the risks aren't just entangling yourself in I don't know that much about kiteboarding. I did it for a week once. Turns out that you can't actually get good at kiteboarding. Kiteboarding wasn't a week. It was 7 days of kiteboarding once a year, every year. And that's apparently not the way to learn kiteboarding.
Who would have thought? So as we kind of look to wrap up here, what's the next big adventure for you?
Yeah, everyone keeps on asking that for some weird reason. And since the events of that book, I have done a number of bigger adventures, including with other people. Right? I'm not the Unabomber of either firefighting or canoe adventure. I'm still evaluating for this summer. It's normally I have a plan by now, and I don't have a plan right now. So that's kind of worrying. It's kind of niggling at my brain. There's there are a couple of ideas I've got. Also, real life does get in the way. We're going to have holiday picks in my department. We pick our holidays in December. Yep. So I'll have a much better idea of what I can do, because so much of it is timing, right? There's large parts of the Arctic. For example, that trip that I did, I finished it in August. If I'd finished it in September, that would have really been pushing it, because a giant series of storms start coming through that neighborhood. And also the polar bears on the coast become much hungrier as they're waiting for food, because they've been starving for longer. So it changes the dynamic. I'll tell you after holiday picks. Okay, sounds good. We'll follow up. So before we go, let the people know where they can find you. Let the people know where you're available on YouTube or social media, stuff like that. Well, if you Google my name and the area that you're interested in, you should be able to find it. I'll say right now I'm on the martial arts front, YouTube's a great place to start. I've got a little PDF that's helped introduce a lot of people to jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu, I was the first guy in my department to do this man-hugging stuff, but it's actually really quite popular now. I'd say it's a good match. I'm sure there's a ton of guys in your department who enjoy rolling around. So yeah, I've got, if you go to grapplearts.com/book, you can download my roadmap for BJJ. That's kind of an introduction to what the hell is going on. Let's simplify this and give you a series of steps to follow that aren't a universal solution, but it's a pretty good starting place. I've got quite an extensive jiu-jitsu library on YouTube. I'm currently working on releasing a series of videos from a trip I did this summer, another solo trip I did in the Subarctic, on my Essential Wilderness YouTube channel. So that's a good starting place. And if you want to check out the book, it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Indigo, anywhere that you want. It'll be coming out March 4th. And it's called Perseverance, Life and Death in the Subarctic. But you should be able to find that pretty easily.
And once again, I'll say I had the privilege of being able to read it before it was released, and it is great. It sucks you right in, and you just pulled right into the story and the depth of the emotion and everything that happens along the journey. So I can't recommend it enough. And once again, Stephan, thank you for joining me today. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your expertise in the conversation. It's been great.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you.